Thanks for joining us tonight. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar at Council for the Homeless for Vancouver's Affordable Housing Fund levy. I'm really happy to see everyone joining us tonight. I'm Laura Ellsworth, Strategic Partnerships and Advocacy Manager with Council for the Homeless, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I hope you'll find this next hour informative and inspiring, and come away with a better understanding of Vancouver's Affordable Housing Fund levy and why it should be renewed. So let's get right to it. I usually end our webinars with a call to action, but tonight I'm going to begin with one. It's a busy time of year, and I know we all just want to know what we can do to help. So in the next 60 minutes, I hope you will gain a better understanding of why the Affordable Housing Fund is such an essential mechanism for increasing and preserving affordable housing stock, and why having more affordable housing will make the most of emergency programs that address homelessness, like emergency shelter. You're going to also hear what the existing Affordable Housing Fund has done, what it can continue to do for our community. And I hope tonight that you will learn a few things that you'll be able to share with your coworkers, neighbors, friends, and family. Most of all, I hope that you walk away knowing that it takes all of us to reduce the stigma of homelessness and dispel myths that commonly circulate about homelessness, its causes, the people who are impacted by it, and the various solutions. Okay, so I see a lot of new folks here tonight, so I do have a few reminders for us as we get started. First, the only people that you will see and hear are the panelists and hosts. If you have questions, feel free to post in the chat or the Q&A. I do have a couple of helpers here with me tonight, and I'll be able to periodically check on it as well. But we do have Roy Vallow, who is the campaign manager for the Bring Vancouver Home campaign, and we have Shavonna McEwen, Equity and Advocacy Director at Council for the Homeless, available as well to try to help answer questions as we go. We will be recording this webinar and we'll send it out shortly after. So those of you who've signed up, you'll receive a link to view it later. Also, it can be viewed on our website anytime in the future. Also, a short survey will appear in your browser after we're done tonight, and I really appreciate you filling it out. It does help us plan our topics, and it keeps us accountable to what questions are on your minds. So here's our agenda for tonight. Our incredible panel is going to share information about the Affordable Housing Fund levy that was originally passed by voters in 2016, why it was passed, what the outcomes of the levy have been over the past 6 years, and they're going to speak to the continuing need for it, and also what the new outcomes of the levy can produce if it's renewed by voters in 2023. And I hope that after learning, some of the reasons why housing that is truly affordable to people with very low incomes is a huge solution to homelessness, and that you'll share what you've learned. I'm really happy to introduce a wonderful panel of folks tonight who together bring a collective knowledge of the Affordable Housing Fund's ghosts of the past, present, and future. Hey, it's Christmas time after all, so I threw in a little Dickens reference for y'all. Alicia Topper, Katie Archer-Jolma, and Ty Stober are here tonight to talk about what the levy funds have done so far and what can be done going forward. So first, I just want to share some basics for you all as we get started. Each of our panelists tonight will delve further into this, but I wanted everyone to have a basic foundation going into our discussion. The Affordable Housing Fund is Vancouver's main community resource to lessen its affordable housing challenges, and it's about to expire at the end of 2023. It was passed by voters in 2016, and it's a 7-year, $6 million per year property tax that costs homeowners about $90 per year, based on a home valued at about $500,000, which is the median home price in Vancouver. The renewal, which will show up on your ballots as Proposition 3 this coming February, is larger, and it will generate $100 million over 10 years. And that will cost about $150 annually for homeowners. And revenues from this levy would be dedicated to housing and housing services for people with low and very low incomes. I did just get a message saying that there's some issues possibly with the chat, so please feel free to use the Q&A feature if the chat isn't working for folks. Okay, Keep going here. So you might be thinking, well, why is Council for the Homeless advocating for this levy? What does this have to do with homelessness? What does affordable housing have to do with homelessness? And Council for the Homeless knows that our community cannot end homelessness if people don't have a place to live as they resolve their homelessness. And here is why this levy needs to be renewed. Council for the Homeless helps people in their time of crisis and when they can no longer afford their home, and when various elements of their life are upside down. Emergency shelter and temporary housing are important, very important, and yet we will not be able to help people move from these temporary places or out of their tents or off sidewalks if they don't have a place to go and live. And if they don't have a permanent place to live, they will cycle back into homelessness. So not surprisingly, the most frequent reasons given for homelessness by people who touch the homeless crisis response system in recent years are a lack of affordable places to live and or not enough income to afford a place to live. And in scarce housing markets like ours, vulnerabilities like physical health, mental health, addiction, and loss of income or household crisis end up becoming causes of homelessness. But the reality is, those things wouldn't be causes if there was enough housing for people at all levels of income in the first place. We also know that Vancouver has experienced a large amount of population growth, and that the city, the county, the state, it's behind on housing stock, and that rents in Vancouver have surpassed that of even Portland, and higher rents lead directly to more homelessness. Additionally, more than half of households in Vancouver are rent burdened, meaning that they pay more than 30% of their income towards rent, which leaves them more vulnerable to falling into homelessness, especially when confronted with things like emergency expenses, loss of physical health, income, and loved ones. So by now, I think that we all know that our community is in the midst of an affordable housing and homelessness crisis. And we share these values that everyone should have a safe, stable place that they can afford to live. We can all do our part to ensure that housing is in reach for everyone. And voting yes to renew the Affordable Housing Fund levy is one way that we can all do something. Our community benefits when everyone has a home, and the Affordable Housing Fund levy is a way to help be a part of making sure that all of our neighbors are housed and safe. Okay, so with that, let's move on to our panel tonight. Please, again, feel free to post questions in the chat or the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them. And I'd like to first introduce Katie Archer-Jolma. Katie is a political consultant, licensed attorney, and registered lobbyist, and she specializes in campaign management, public relations, and public policy, having managed the first successful Bring Vancouver Home campaign in 2016. Katie is married, a mother to twins, and a third-generation Clark County resident, and she's here to give us an overview of the 2016 campaign, why voters approved it, and provide a bit more context as we head into discussing the levy renewal campaign. So Katie, I will stop sharing this screen, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Laura. So thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for all of you attending in the audience. I am very proud of the work that we were able to accomplish in 2016, but that's really a reflection of the voters and of Vancouver. And so I always say, we really need to give the pat on the back to the voters who cared to pass this. So what I'll do is just kind of walk everyone through a little bit of a timeline because this was more like a 2-year process than just a couple of months to launch this. So the catalyst after coming out of the recessions was that in December of 2014, Courtyard Village in the Rose Village area by Washington Elementary, they were looking at a mass eviction just 2 weeks prior to Christmas. There were about 151 units. There were multiple families impacted, and at the time, and it continues today, there was only 2% vacancy. So that's total vacancy. That's not necessarily what these families could afford. And so our social service providers were overwhelmed with displaced families. Where are these families going to go 2 weeks before Christmas and after they've already paid their rent for the month? There wasn't enough housing inventory. So that led the city of Vancouver to convene the Affordable Housing Task Force. That was April in 2015. And they set about studying the issue through a group of outreach through the community and focus groups with the community, and looked at and studied the actual rents, the housing stock, and what they could do within state law. By 2015, June of 2015, what they had discovered is that 24,000 renters were cost burdened, meaning that they're spending more than 30% of their total income on rent. That continued to hold and continues to hold. You'll see that that number has actually increased since 2015. And we saw that during this time, the Vancouver was actually getting national attention for the high cost of rent here, the lack of vacancy, and just the overall tension that was starting to build within the market. We were labeled as very landlord friendly. And by September of 2015, rents had peaked at over $1,000 for just a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. And that's if you could find one, because 2% vacancy, anything less than about 4.5% is considered a tight market. So less than 2% it is very, very hard for people to find anything at that point. So then following that, the task force then made recommendations to the city of Vancouver going into the fall of 2015. And because Washington state does not allow rent caps, which would have to be passed in Olympia at the state level, the city of Vancouver went ahead and passed some pretty progressive renter protections that have served as a model for other cities throughout the state. So starting in October 2015, a 45-day notice of rent increase was issued, 60-day notice to vacate, and then source of income protection, which meant that landlords could not discriminate against people who had Social Security as their income, disability as their income, spousal support, or other types of non-employment type income. So those protections were put in place. 2016 came, and then by March, many of the presenters here, and then the Council for the Homeless share, a lot of the stakeholders, the nonprofit stakeholders within the community got together and said, we've got to pass an affordable housing fund. Nothing will change if we don't add more units. And it's a product really of the recession, because all house building stopped during the recession. I mean, I'm generalizing, but effectively, we were not building enough housing stock during the recession to keep up with population growth. And what we also learned during this time is that our homeless or our housing insecure, they're from Vancouver, they're from Clark County, they're not moving in from Portland, they're not coming from other places. And we know this because of last known address, employment history, those types of things. Our social service providers are saying these are Clark County residents, Vancouver residents who are impacted. So we get together the campaign. We launch it right away. We have buy-in from the community right away from our nonprofits, which was for the first time, because generally nonprofits are banned from being able to participate in the political process. They can lose their 501c3 status if they engage in politics. But this was a nonpartisan issue that was a ballot measure, not a candidate or a campaign. And so this allowed our nonprofit community to go all in, and they did. We got together a campaign. I was hired, Roy Vallo and Melissa Vallo were hired. We had professional door knockers, and we set about letting Clark County know why this was important. And for me, as a third generation Clark County resident, I was the one who went out into the community. I talked to the neighborhood associations, school groups, I mean, anyone who would listen. And at first, people were afraid. And there were a lot of misconceptions about who this money would help. And so a lot of the what we did was actually just talk to people about those fears and answer questions for them. And so part of what we put together was a poll that summer. And this graphic kind of sets about how we ask the questions. And we knew we had a couple of facts and figures to work with. One is that at the time we had over 1,900 children in the Vancouver and Evergreen school districts who were either unhoused or in crisis of being unhoused. And we thought, I mean, kids in crisis, that's going to be what drives people to vote for this. And when we asked, just a neutral question right off the bat, we still had a nice 38% respondents say yes, they would support it. But when we drilled down into the amount of children who are impacted, the likelihood went up 48.9%. But what was surprising to us is when we asked about if it would give seniors on fixed incomes a chance to live independently, those numbers shot up to almost 60%. And we wondered, well, why? And one, it's because we found out that seniors in our community are the most afraid of losing their homes and becoming displaced because they're on fixed incomes. And that absolutely made sense to us once we were able to analyze the results. And then as we talk to more and more people, that group, which also tends to be a likely voter demographic, realized that this would be helping them and that to stay in their homes. And there's many different parts of the program that would be in place to help them, which Alicia and Ty will go through. So once we saw that, and that also, making sure that people understood that these are families who are working, they are just not making ends meet to where they can afford what's available. But many of the people are families with children, they are employed, and that messaging and the responsibility, I think that Vancouver voters took it upon themselves, because really it was like, well, what are we going to do about this? These are our neighbors. And so how do we bring them inside? And that's by saying, you know what, we're going to open our purses a little bit. We're going to be the ones who solve our own problems by passing this affordable housing fund and making sure we're making up the housing stock that we lost during the recession. Now with COVID, we've got a whole nother pandemic and problem for us to solve, but I'll switch that over to Ty here to go into that. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you all for bearing with us on the chat technical difficulties. I was playing IT and multitasking, so I appreciate everyone's patience with that. Okay, so I am going to switch screens again. I'm really flexing my Zoom skills here tonight, everybody. And I am going to introduce next to you Mayor Pro Tem Ty Stober. And here we go. Let me get back to this. So yes, next up we have Mayor Pro Tem Ty Stober, and he is here tonight. He's been serving on Vancouver City Council since 2016, and since day one, literally day one, Ty has been involved with homelessness and housing issues, probably since before day one. He was a champion of the original Prop 1 that Katie was just talking about, and he's continually pushed the city to leverage the dollars to the greatest extent possible. And he's going to talk to you more about what that looks like. And it's actually one of my favorite things about this levy. So yeah, he's going to share a little bit more about the outcomes over the past 6 years, which have really been quite impressive. So I am going to turn it over to Ty. And thank you so much for being here, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Laura, and I really appreciate you bringing all this together. Katie talked about Courtyard Village being the catalyst for this whole thing. I didn't realize it, but I came to understand that incident actually personally impacted me. When several years later, I found out that my lunch buddy, his family was one of the displaced families. And I had always wondered why his family was couch surfing when I first spent time with him, but that was the reason. Monday morning, I woke up and checked Reddit. If you don't know what it is, it's another social networking platform, and there is a Vancouver WA group in there, and this is what I saw. Somebody expressing their frustrations that they were finding rooms for rent, not studio apartments, but rooms for rent for over $1,000 a month. And so what that just shows is, while we've been at this for 6 years now, we still have a long ways to go. Go to the next slide. And this is the picture for why is Washington State so bad. And this is a key graphic here. So Washington has the fewest number of housing units per household in the entire country. And not just by a little bit. Oregon is second, but we are significantly lower than even Oregon and way below the national average. If you go to the next slide. And here's where it really comes home. It's not just that the state of Washington doesn't have enough homes, but Clark County especially doesn't have enough homes. We are in this very unfortunate group of counties throughout the state that have the worst building stock available for our homeowners or for our families when they're trying to find a place to live. And as was mentioned before, if you can't find a place to live, that means the rents are going to go up. So go to the next slide here. And it is not just what's happened in the past, but it's also what's happening now. We are still, as a county, extremely underbuilt. We're underbuilding our new housing stock. So today, Clark County needs over 13,000 homes just to meet current demand. The city of Vancouver, that estimate is around 5,000 homes are needed just to meet current demand. And as you know, it takes time to build. You can't just turn that spigot on and all of a sudden homes appear. It takes years to get stuff to happen. Go ahead and go to the next slide here. So this here is actually through 5 years of the Affordable Housing Fund. We have been able to get a great return on the investment that we've made. There's one piece of data that isn't on this slide, but there's new units, and we have been able to fund new units of about 500 units so far during this during the period of this affordable housing levy. The interesting thing, though, is half of that, 250 of those units, happened in the first 4 years of the Affordable Housing Fund, or the first 5 years of the Affordable Housing Fund. And there are another 250 units currently in the pipeline. So let's just think about that for a second. So what that means is from startup of this fund until today, it took us all that time to build the first 250 units. But once we were able to get the flow going, now we've got 250 more units in the pipeline. So the reason why I really want to bring that home is because if we were to stop, if this fund doesn't get renewed and we have to pull all this back, it will take us years to restart that flow of housing construction in this area to happen again. So keeping this thing going is so important to us. It's also important because the city, from a land use standpoint, is starting to rethink how are we best using our land in order to get affordable housing units in the community. And we have the best way to do that is when the city actually owns the land that we're doing the construction on. And we have two key pieces of property that the city, the council has set goals to make sure that affordable housing is included, income-based housing is included. And those two areas is the Waterfront Gateway, which is all the empty property around City Hall. And the other one is Vancouver Heights, where Tower Mall has been torn down, and we have done a whole new master plan for that area. In both of those areas, because we own the land, it will make it easier to ensure that there's going to be affordable housing. But the Affordable Housing Fund is going to be such an important component of being able to leverage in order to get that housing to actually be built. So it's one thing to say, okay, we've got the land set aside, but the Affordable Housing Fund will help us get those units actually built in those two very important locations in our city. The other thing that I really want to point on, I think this is the next slide, is leveraging. So what we have seen is for every single dollar that we invested in production of new housing or in renovation of existing stock in order to build or maintain our affordable housing stock in the city, we've been able to leverage those dollars 8 to 1. So a dollar used from the fund was able to bring 8 additional dollars into our community. And that's where, if we're going to be successful, we can't just rely on our own money. We need to be able to bring that money in from other places. So another key reason why it's so important for us to keep this fund going. You may ask, why $10 million in 10 years? The same question be asked about why was it $6 million in 7 years? $6 million in 7 years was really because we didn't know. And we took a best guess at it. And it's been very successful for us. So as council started contemplating taking this back out, we knew that it needed to be more than just the $6 million a year. And we want to make it as long as possible before we have to go back out and renew this levy again. So 10 years is the maximum amount of time state law allows us to do this levy for. And 10 million was trying to make a bigger commitment into the fund. And you may say, well, why isn't it an escalating fund? Well, unfortunately, we are limited by the number of words that we can put on the ballot. And as soon as we started to get complicated, we ran out of words that we could use. So this was a good compromise to make sure we're making a bigger investment in this fund. And I will stop there and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Appreciate it. All right, so next I would like to introduce to you Treasurer Alicia Topper. Let me get my information pulled up here. So Treasurer Topper is, well, let's see, get my screens situated if y'all could see all my screens. Okay, there we go. Oops, here we go. I'll get it together, guys. Here we go. Okay, so Treasurer Topper has been just an absolute, established advocate for affordable housing and has served as the co-chair of the City of Vancouver's Affordable Housing Task Force in 2015, the one that Katie talked about earlier. Her work as a Vancouver City Councilor earned her the title of Advocacy All-Star from the Association of Washington Cities for advancing policy solutions for homelessness and affordable housing. And she was also appointed by Governor Jay Inslee to serve 2 terms on the state's Housing Finance Commission. Alicia currently chairs the Community Action Advisory Board, fighting for low-income and BIPOC communities, and most recently, she has worked with County Council to secure $2 million in county funding to establish a down payment assistance fund for low-income first-time home buyers. So, Treasurer Topper, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we will talk about what the continuing need is for the levy and what the potentials are if we renew this in February.
All right, thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here tonight to learn about this incredibly important proposition, which is Proposition 3. I'll go ahead and just reinforce some of the points that you just heard from Councillor Stover and from Katie. Vancouver still needs the affordable housing levy. We have made incredible strides over the last 6 years, but we have more work to do and we can build on those successes. We know that we still have over 24,000 neighbors who are struggling financially within the City of Vancouver limits. We know that our vacancy rate is still pinned around 2 to 3%. And as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, when you have strong demand and low supply, prices drive up. So we've seen rapidly increasing rents. And when you see rapidly increasing rents that people cannot afford, what happens? You have no other alternative than to sleep in your car, to find a trailer van, to sleep in a tent and be without a home. And we have seen that far too much for our neighbors and our brothers and sisters and our family members. So one point that people ask a lot about when we talk about affordable housing is rent cap. Can we just freeze rents or limit the amount of increases? In the state of Washington, we cannot, and that would take a legislative change. So we're focused on local solutions. And in the next slide, I want to show you why we need those local solutions. If you were to be able to see this graph, what you would see is that Vancouver rents over the past 12 months alone, so from November to November, have increased 5.3%. We did see a slight decrease last month, but overall for the year, renters have seen a little over a 5% increase. And this outpaces the state average of 4.2% and is somewhat similar, but still higher than the national average of 4.6. On the next slide, you can see how this has compounded year over year since the levy has been doing its great work. In 2019, we saw 2.1% increase. So that was 2% more than 2018. But then if you skip ahead to 2020, which is this light blue line, for that year, you saw an increase of 6.7. So that was going into the pandemic. The following year, 2021, we saw a 14.8% increase within the city of Vancouver limits. So that is 15% when most people's income have not increased at that equal rate. So just affordability in general, you add on another 5% this year, people are struggling. So if you look at the next slide, I wanted to point out the actual income and what this means to our very low income and vulnerable communities. So if I'm a single mom and I have a kid and I want to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, if I'm only going to pay 30% of my income, which is $42,600 a year, the maximum rent that I can afford is $1,065. In the city of Vancouver, you can't find a 1-bedroom unit unless it's subsidized or a part of our levy for less than $1,360. So you're looking at almost a $300 difference a month in affordability. And that's if I am looking as a single mom with my kid to be in the same bedroom or to have my kid sleep in the living room. If I wanted a 2-bedroom unit, so we had our own space, because maybe it's a teenager and they hate me, but I still love them and want them to have their own room, I'm going to be even more in a deficit and likely going to be severely cost burdened, almost paying 50% of my monthly income to rent. So this is the conundrum that we're trying to solve with this fund. So if you look at the next slide, what we're going to be asking voters in this replacement levy is to help our most vulnerable residents. So this isn't something that will be available to every single person in our community, but it will be available to those that income qualify. So we're talking about seniors on fixed incomes. We're talking about hardworking family with their children who maybe are in the service industry making minimum wage or a little above, people who have disabilities or special needs that are on fixed incomes as well, veterans, people experiencing homelessness, which we know is an achievement that we want to get to a place where we don't have to have people living on our streets. We want them to be housed. So what we're hoping to do with our levy, in the next slide, is to ask voters to approve a 10-year, $10 million a year levy. It is a replacement levy. When we first went out to Katie's presentation, we asked voters to approve 36 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And as the city has grown and they've had more development, that means their assessed value has grown. So that levy rate has come down. And I think it's come down to about 18 cents per 1,000. So by going back to the voters and asking for 10 million a year for that $500,000 assessed value home, we're asking folks to pay about $54 more a year. And that is going to help us produce so much more homes. And, you know, some people use the term units, but these really are homes for families. So it's going to be a little more of an investment, but the outcomes with that match, that 8-to-1, will be exponential. So we're going to hopefully create safe and affordable housing for nearly 5,000 families in need and individuals in need here in the city of Vancouver. And on the next slide, we'll talk about how we're going to do that through partnerships. Essentially, we're going to be putting money into 5 buckets, and 4 of those will all be through partnerships. So housing production and preservation, 60% of the funds will be targeted towards creating new housing or preserving existing affordable housing. Rental assistance is still a big important factor, as you saw in those increasingly rising rents, and we're going to set aside 20% of our fund. So $2 million a year. If you look at temporary shelter, we know there is a need to sustain and create new beds for folks to sleep at night. So we're putting 10% of the funds towards the temporary shelter. And then home ownership for individuals at 60% of the area median income, there will be 5% of the funds set aside for them each year, hoping to promote home ownership, really helping people build generational wealth and get themselves and their families out of poverty. 5% will be used for implementation, which is a very fair amount for the amount of work. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that the Affordable Housing Fund is a competitive grant program. And the partnership is the key. I want to continuously talk about partnerships because nonprofits like Council for the Homeless are really key and integral in making this a success. So we will take in grants, or the city will take in grants. We're all a part of the city, and they will award it to nonprofits who will provide those rental assistance through contracts. The nonprofit developers will be able to apply either as a loan or a grant in order to use those funds for construction, or to leverage those funds to get state and federal funding and bring those dollars back here into our city. For-profit developers are very competitive with these funds as well. They can usually do larger projects, and they can really help us get more homes in the pipeline, really helping tie with all of those outcome measures that he's working on as Mayor Pro Tem. And property owners benefit because they don't have to give a notice to vacate or foreclose on someone and evict them. So we're able to get the money in their hands so they can help keep people housed. So this is really the community working together, using these funds to leverage people's housing stability. So next slide. How it works. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but if you have questions, please do chat it into the chat and we will get them answered. But what we're really trying to do with that 60% or $6 million a year is to increase our housing supply. And we're going to do that by providing funds to nonprofit and private developers to actually construct and build homes. One example on the slide was Reach. They're a nonprofit developer who built one of the first projects, and it was targeted towards seniors, low-income seniors. I went to the ribbon cutting and groundbreaking, and when I was at the grand opening, I mean, the transformation it made for people that had no place to go because they were being displaced because of rent increases. They knew that they had a stable place where they knew what the rent was every single month, and it was clean and it was safe, and there was a community. So 49 homes were available for seniors just because of the Affordable Housing Fund. In exchange with nonprofits, we ask them to make those units affordable for at least 50 years. So we know for a minimum of 50 years that, you know, my grandma, who now is living in Isabella Court, will have a safe place to live, because my grandma's going to live till she's at least 105. So in that scenario. And then, of course, if it's privately built, there still is affordability requirements. So just because it's a private developer doesn't mean that they only have affordability for a year. They have to commit that affordability for at least 20 years. So keeping that stock in the accessible arena for renters for 20 years. And then, of course, we make money available through this fund for land and property purchases. To a question that was posed earlier by Michelle, if there was a developer who wanted to buy a mobile home park and preserve it for affordability, as long as those incomes of the people living there were at or below 50%, they could use the funds for purchase of land. Next slide. So one of the things that's important is that these funds are able to incentivize the private market to increase affordable housing. I know there is sometimes bad feelings about developers, but in this case, it's a good thing because we're using their expertise, we're using their development skills to get housing at 50% or below area median income for those really low income families. So it provides them a financial incentive to either convert existing market rate apartments to affordable housing, or it gives them an opportunity to build new. So the preservation piece is important. If I have to put on a new roof and it's going to cost me $1 million, I may decide to sell that apartment complex, take my profit, and let them fix the roof. If they're fixing the roof, they're going to raise the rents and they're going to pass that on to everyone living there. So we're going to help them take care of that roof so they can keep the rents low. Next slide, please. And again, on preserving existing housing. I mean, honestly, this is an important thing for critical repairs. We'll also be able to assist homeowners, you know, if they have repairs that need to be done, so that way they can afford to stay in their home where it's safe and clean. But ultimately, this is really about preserving our current housing that is available and affordable. Next slide. And this is my neighbor, Tim. He is on a fixed income, and he was formerly, he served our country, and he's a vet, but he couldn't afford to have his roof repaired or his house painted. And at the time he applied to the city of Vancouver, we used to have a fund, I think it was community development block grant possibly, and he was able to get some of that work done. And then the city puts a lien on the house, and then they pay it back when the house sells or you refinance. Well, those funds weren't available anymore. And so now the Affordable Housing Fund will fill that gap. They're going to help low-income homeowners be able to do those really critical repairs, and especially even ADA, if it comes down to being an affordability issue, to keep people in their homes. And preventing homelessness. That's such a goal of this fund. So we're hoping to help keep 1,500 families in their homes by providing rental assistance. And this will likely go through contracts with nonprofit service providers through rent vouchers. And then they'll also be able to complement that with services that can help individuals receiving those rental assistance funds achieve self-sufficiency or achieve greater skills for job force work or access any other services that they may need throughout our community. And of course, it will help families experiencing homeless find housing and keep that housing. So it will help the pipeline of helping people find a safe place to live. And of course, if you're facing eviction, you can apply for funds and they would help you stay in your home too. So the preventing homelessness piece, that will be mostly through nonprofit service providers, but it'll also help with shelter beds. So one thing we know is that for the first levy, the city council realized that we had major inadequacy in shelters for single women, and that was an area where we had too many women sleeping on the street without a place to go. So the affordable housing funds were able to bring online additional shelter beds for single women. And rather than it just being your overnight and then you have to leave during the day and then you come back and try to sign in to get in, it was establishing a continuation of overnight and day stay for single women. So these funds are critical in just bridging the gap when we find that there may be a need, and we have that 10% set aside for homeless services. And this is going to be near the end of my portion because I do want to make sure I give Laura some time, but just really, it's important for everyone to know whether you're a property owner or not, but the Affordable Housing Fund is really a tool where we can create the most impact with our investment. I personally, as Alicia Topper, who lives in downtown Vancouver, believe that my tax dollars are a statement of my values. I care about my community, I care about my neighbors, and I'm willing to help put money forward to help families. And when I see that that investment and that my values are being shown through serving over 5,000 vulnerable neighbors, to me, it's worth the investment. And you know that we can assist more people. To tie slide, if you're able to take my one tax dollar and I can bring in $8 more and pair that up to make an even deeper impact, that is a positive. And then finally, with new rental units, once they're held as affordable, you know you're going to get at least 20 years. You know you're going to be helping families for a generation plus to be able to have an affordable place to live. So those are three things I think that really demonstrate the impact. And I'm really excited to be on the committee to help promote this levy and to help share the great successes that the current levy have had, and then the great work that we still have to come. So thank you so much to the Council for the Homeless and for my colleagues here on the panel for helping to get the word out, and available for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Treasurer Topper. Really That's really compelling information there. So yes, thank you for sharing that. And I agree. I think my favorite thing is the $8 for everyone, $1 contributed. I think that's just so impressive. So yeah, so a yes vote on Prop 3 means that, you know, everybody has a safe, affordable place to call home. Housing is a basic human need, and the Affordable Housing Fund is a powerful and effective way to contribute to the solutions to ending homelessness. Emergency shelter, rental assistance, affordable housing that this fund generates and preserves actually helps to shorten the time that people are homeless from our perspective here at Council for the Homeless. It provides places for people to go when their personal safety nets fail in the form of emergency shelter or access to rental assistance. I think, again, this is just such a great example of rubbing two pennies together to make a nickel. And, by renewing this levy, by voting yes on Prop 3 by February 14th, our community is stepping up, and we're walking alongside our most vulnerable community members and saying, yes, everyone deserves a safe, affordable place to live. And we want to help accomplish that together. So here's what you can do. I hope you have a better understanding of just what the Affordable Housing Fund has done and what it can continue to do in our community. I hope you'll share the information you've learned tonight, reduce the stigma of homelessness, and dispel myths that you might hear from coworkers, friends, or family. Keep an eye out for those ballots. They will come out in late January, and be sure to vote yes on Prop 3 by February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. What a great way to show your love for our neighbors in need. And I want to thank our panel again tonight, and thank you to our audience for some great questions. We do have a little bit of time left tonight if there are any outstanding questions in the chat. I just want to leave everybody with well wishes for a safe and a warm and a healthy holiday season. And we will have another webinar coming up in January. Actually, well, early 2023, we'll say. So we're going to be kicking off our policy and advocacy work at the state level in Olympia. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all as we wrap up our webinars for 2022. I just want to thank all of you who have attended regularly, and thank you for asking compelling questions and being a part of the solutions for homelessness here in our community. So thanks again, everybody. I hope you all have a fantastic night, and we'll see you in 2023.
Laura, real quick before we go. So there was a question in the chat that I don't think got answered. The question came from Dwight. He was asking about, is there mental health services as a component of the fund? The fund is focused around housing. There are other income streams, though, that can build those wraparound services. The county has a mental health sales tax that they have been, that they are getting ready to, my understanding is they're getting ready to go back out and start letting some contracts out about that. So this is the housing component, and then all of those services get built around this in order to meet the community needs.
Yeah, and then in the Q&A, maybe someone from Council from the Homeless can follow up with Carrie Stansberry, brought up a couple questions as well.
Great. Yeah. And Dwight, I'm not sure if your question got answered about can you vote now. The ballots will come out the end of January, and the deadline to vote is February 14th. So can't vote yet, but wait for that ballot to come in the mail. I know it's kind of a different time of year to be receiving a ballot, but it will be coming. So yes, thank you so much, everybody. Any other last minute questions? We do have a few minutes here. Okay. All right. Well, please do reach out to us. Yep.
Sorry, there was a great question in the chat in the Q&A about folks who might be undocumented. Whether or not, now I'm trying to find it. But essentially whether or not folks who are undocumented might be able to benefit from this, from these units as well.
So there are some requirements, but I recommend we get an email and follow up so we can look at all the technical application information. Only because they do income verification. I'm not sure if the city is doing if they're doing immigration status. So I'm not sure. Ty's shaking his head no. So that's good. But we
And
can follow
another
up.
good question, since we've got a couple minutes, are you going to cap the property tax for certain income levels? It doesn't help when the property tax keeps going up and people don't get raises while minimum wage goes up. Then these families will be houseless if this increases don't have a limit based on income.
So with property tax exemptions, there are programs available through the Clark County Assessor's Office. If you are a senior and your income qualify, it will freeze your assessed value. So that will very significantly reduce your property tax. If you aren't a senior, there are some deferral programs that you can apply for. The affordable housing levy specifically is considered a regular levy, therefore you are not exempt regardless of income, but there are programs available to lessen the general property taxes. And I'm happy to put my information in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me to talk about any of those programs.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. All right. We have a few more minutes. If anyone has any last minute questions they'd like to jump in with. There's Alicia's information in the chat.
And I'm not sure if I can send it to
Oh.
everyone, so I'll have to cut and paste it for me.
Yep, well, I'll do that right now. Oops. Well.
And we'll have Roy take down Sharon's phone number so that way we can follow up.
Great.
Thank you, Sharon. I love the Q&A. This is fun.
Yeah. All right. Roy, did you get that phone number before I move us all back into the Zoom vortex?
We got another question. David had asked earlier if some of the funds will be used for the city operations facility, Mayor Pro Tem.
No.
By the way,
we use the city's no. City operations facility is funded out of the utilities and out of the general fund. Yeah, so no, this is very restricted to the housing purposes.
And so for that, I think that this person maybe is asking specifically about the housing that is going in on 4th Plain in the corridor there.
Yeah, so that the 4th Plain Commons is a recipient of Affordable Housing Fund dollars. So that's that big colorful building that's going up on 4th Plain right now. That is not the operations center. The current operations center, when that gets torn down, which will be 2026, 2027-ish, there will be a master plan done for that piece of property. And I would hope, I don't know that I'll still be around at that point, but I would hope that the council at that point also incorporates affordable housing into that development.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I love your expertise and the knowledge that you all collectively bring. So, all right, everybody. We are coming up on our hour together, so I'm gonna let everyone go, and thanks again for attending tonight and the great discussion. And yeah, take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.